democracy. So one of my jobs, and if you feel this way, I'm conscious of the fact that there are Republicans in the room, there are people who disagree with me with this statement. We need to persuade people of whatever we need to persuade them in a way that is attractive. One of the mistakes the Democrats made in the last election is we alienated a lot of people. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We were self-righteous. By the way, we were not the media outlets where America gets their news. But have conversations with people with whom you disagree in a way that is civil and maybe education for people. What do? Let me just get this off the table. I mentioned that my legislative tools as a member of the minority are pretty slim. We've got all kinds of bills to reverse the closure of the Department of Education. Those bills will not see the light of day. I have a bully pulpit, this microphone I'm holding, the fact that I go on MSNBC, CNN, by the way, I just said we need to be in different media outlets. Turns out, didn't know this, shame on me, most Americans today are getting their political news and news generally from YouTube. Did not know that. That tells you a little bit something about how we lost in the last go-round. So I will be using my bully pulpit. I will be urging, and I'm going to bring this to a close because this does get political, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries to get their acts together. And lastly, and you should know this, but it's unique to me, I'm the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, as you heard before, and one of the truly awful possibilities is that the intelligence community, that's 18 agencies, 2 of which are operational, meaning they break things and carry weapons and can hurt people, CIA and FBI, are directly under my purview. Jamie Raskin and I split FBI. He's got the criminal aspects of FBI, I've got the counterterror and counterintelligence aspects of FBI. I worry that on the spectrum of horribles, intelligence may be compromised because it doesn't suit the president's hopes and beliefs. That's a bad thing. That the brain drain will take away Chinese linguists and cryptographers and people with remarkable skills and make us less safe because people are just get tired of doing what they're doing. Or third, and most catastrophically, that the powers and capabilities, the surveillance, and the power to use physical force may be turned inward on American people. Not happening on my watch, not happening under Jamie Raskin's watch. So I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours to make sure that that was a really long answer, but in Norwalk that question came up about 6 times, so just put it out there. Yes, sir. There we go. Yes, sir.
Charles Dunn from Southport. Thank you for being here while your Republican colleagues run through the hills. I need to preface my question.
A little closer or people won't hear you.
What?
You got to keep the mic really close.
Oh, okay. Do you remember when Trump did his PR stunt holding up the Bible during the protests in Washington, D.C. in his first term? As you might all remember, he asked General Mark Milley and Secretary of Defense Mark Esper if he could have the National Guard shoot the unarmed American citizens there, maybe just in the legs. Does everyone here remember that day? My question, I'm sorry, I care about DOGE and venture being laid off, everything else, but I have to get to a really serious point here. My question is, can Trump declare martial law and use the U.S. Army National Guard against peaceful American citizens protesting? Can he also suspend federal elections in 2026 and 2028? Also, he has fired the General Jacks. Does that mean he can authorize the illegal and unconstitutional invasion of Greenland, Panama, or even Canada? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Coincidentally, a week ago, I was with Mark Milley, who is a remarkable man. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and on the debit side of Mark Milley's accounting, of course, as he was in battle dress when that event occurred. He accompanied the president through Lafayette Square. And I think he's actually been working very hard to sort of make up for that. He became one of the most aggressive critics of President Trump, and what he told me a week ago, because we have a long list of possible horribles, what Mark Milley told me a week ago was that he spent a lot of time convincing the president when the, I guess BLM riots were in Seattle and Portland, convincing the president not to declare that an insurrection was underway and therefore have the powers associated with the Insurrection Act. And in some ways, I think this is the real threat. There's threats to voting, but this is a very real threat. And it has implications for how we think about it and how we act. And Milley's worry was that if there is violence, not just in 2 cities, but in 30 cities, that the president will declare an insurrection, and that gives him the authority to deploy the U.S. Armed Forces inside the United States, which otherwise is constitutionally prohibited. And as Milley said, and he's a man who would know, he said, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines are not police officers. They are not peacekeepers. They are lethal. They are designed to destroy things and kill people. And he just said, be alert to what that means to have the 82nd Airborne on the streets of Chicago. So that, I think, is a very real fear, because in the last Trump administration, Milley spent a lot of time successfully preventing him from doing that. That has implications, by the way, for if and when the moment comes to protest, and maybe it's April 5th, what we do and how we do it. But that is a very significant risk. The invasion, the question is, let me dispose of this really quickly. I really don't believe there's a major risk of a military invasion of either Greenland or Panama or Canada. I think these are things that the president says that his people love, but I think our officer corps would really very quickly come to understand that absent a congressional declaration of war, a premeditated invasion would be very clearly an illegal order. So let me leave that there.
So
Yes, sir.
Please state your name and town, and you have 2 minutes.
Aziz Siyan from Fairfield. Thank you to Mr. Nice to be here. I have 2 small questions. Number 1, that as you mentioned, people are losing their life savings in the stock market and what's happening in this uncertain situation. What the Democratic Party as a party can do to stop it? And my other question is that what are the major mistakes done by Democratic Party that gave landslide victory to Donald Trump?
Very good questions. Very good questions. Again, I want to not spend too much time on the Democratic Party, but I will nonetheless answer your questions. What can the United States, what can the Democratic Party do to stop the volatility in the stock market? The honest answer is not a whole lot, right? The president is creating this volatility not just by imposing tariffs. Some of you will know a company called Terex, used to be based in Westport, now they're in Norwalk. They make capital equipment. I visited them the other day, and they said that if there are tariffs on China the way the president says, we will lose $100 million in operating income. Now, maybe you don't care about that. We don't like corporations or something. But that is why the stock market is going down. And it is exacerbated, of course, by the start, on-again, off-again nature of these tariffs. The markets don't like uncertainty, and there's a great deal of uncertainty. Okay, I got to keep this to about 90 seconds. The Democratic Party, of course, has spent an immense amount of time and energy, and one of the reasons, candidly, it looks feckless right now, is that we're having a family conversation about precisely what went wrong. And on the righter ends of the party, well, we spent way too much time talking about transgender rights or whatever. On the left side of the party, we weren't bold enough with our economic prescriptions. There's a whole long argument. And in an effort to keep this very short, we faced some unique things. We faced a president who, in my opinion, should have abided by his decision to be a one-term transitional president. We had a vice president who not only didn't go through the sort of formal and useful process of a primary, but didn't have nearly enough time to put together a campaign. And then, 2 other things. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on the internal machinations of the Democratic Party. I did mention that we were stupid on media. I said it before. I would regularly go on media outlets that have 300,000 viewers. And there's these podcasts that no one has ever heard of that have 7 million viewers. And oh, by the way, as I said, everybody apparently now gets their news from YouTube. So we really screwed that up. Here, and again, I'm going to leave this question behind after this. My own view is that in a society where the economic disparities are as big as they have been since the 1920s, where young people can't move to our community because they can't afford housing, where healthcare is unavailable to people who can't afford it, we should refocus on economic messages and getting stuff done. Building housing, continuing to require that Medicare negotiate drug prices, making it easier for people to go to college or to two-year trade school or whatever it may be, and be a little more cautious and a little less self-righteous on cultural and social issues. Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to get in trouble with some people for saying this. The big thing my party can do to put a check on this presidency, of course, is to retake the House majority in 16 months. So I ask this to you as a question, and again, I know I'm wandering into a buzzsaw here. I have a wife, a mom, 2 sisters, and 2 daughters. I am 200% passionate about women's reproductive rights. But do I want Henry Cuellar or a devout Catholic who disagrees with me on that issue to see me say there is no room for you in our movement? I'm not sure that that's a good idea. So we need to be a little less judgy, a little less self-righteous, a lot less self-righteous.
Thank you for your hard work. Chris and I support your vote on censure. It was a courageous vote.
Not a courageous vote.
I'll address that.
My question for you is, it's been reported in the news that the intelligence and defense agencies now are standing down from offensive cybersecurity operations against the Russians. Have the Russians reciprocated, number one? And number two, have we lowered our defenses regarding Russian offensive cybersecurity operations?
Yeah, great question. Let me address both the question and what provoked a little bit of a reaction there. Talk about on again, off again. You know, the president ordered the stop of both the sharing of weapons as well as the sharing of intelligence with the Ukrainians, and then promptly 2 weeks later reversed that, and so now we're passing weapons and sharing intelligence. The intelligence sharing we do is really important because Russia's military advantage is such that if we can give the Ukrainians warning of an attack on a power plant, it really makes a huge difference for the Ukrainians. And frankly, a lot of the weapons that we provide, artillery ammunition, tanks, they can get that elsewhere. They can't get our intelligence anywhere else. And so that actually is a very big deal. The answer to your question is no, we have not lowered our defenses with respect to Russia. They regularly, with the Chinese, ping our networks, do their thing, and we have not lowered our defenses. Now, obviously, in my opinion, we've done something more damaging, which is we basically said, hey, Putin, we're your friend now. You know, right? And we don't much like Zelensky either. So that's not, tactical, but from a strategic standpoint, you can imagine what that does to Ukrainian morale and what it does to Putin when he says, wow, boy, can I get away with some things. Let me, because it's going to come up, take 90 seconds on the Al Green vote. I know, and it was very painful for me that I really disappointed a lot of friends and supporters with that vote. And so let me, and I don't expect to talk for 90 seconds and convince you that I was right, but I do owe you an explanation, and so I'm going to give you that explanation, and you'll make of it what you will. Al Green's a good friend. We've served on the Financial Services Committee for many years. And my thinking was, in September of 2009, when Joe Wilson did something which at the time was unprecedented and horrible, shouted at Barack Obama, "You lie," I voted to sanction him for that. And so when Al did a much more extravagant protest, which required the sergeant at arms to take him off and stop the president and everything, I asked myself, how can I vote to censure Joe Wilson and not Al Green? And if I do that, doesn't the American belief that politicians only believe that the rules apply to the other side, don't I give momentum to that? Now, what I subsequently learned, and here's where I got this wrong, or where I underappreciated something. I know from the 2 hours that I spent with the Connecticut NAACP, about 72 hours after that vote, that landed really brutally with the black community and with my black constituents. And I'm not of that community, so shame on me for not appreciating that. And I've worked very hard over a long period of time to represent that community well, and to do the things that are important to that community. And in that particular instance, I did not appreciate how that emotionally landed. I also think it's really, really important when our chief fear is that the laws will no longer apply to anybody, and that we say the problem with this president is that he's ignoring the law, that I don't open the door to the notion, and look, I'm not dumb, I understand that a House floor procedure is not the same as a law, but I did in the moment feel that it was important to stand up for equal application of the rules and the law. Now, again, I know that that's not going to satisfy everybody. I know it was controversial and it pains me. I don't mind battling MAGA. I've been doing it for a long time. It really pains me when I hurt people in my family, and so this was a hard one, but I leave that explanation with you.
So how are you fixing it? How are you making up for that?
Hi, Vicki Volper from Westport. So I'm very, very much afraid of Trump not obeying the rule of law. And when I see major law firms and major universities capitulating to him, it makes it much, much worse. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get together that 3.5% we need for peaceful protest. I'm march this morning, and I'm marching every place, and I'm gathering as big a crowd as I can to get together, because we are in a hair and fire moment. And I do not think that waiting to take over the House in 2 years is going to cut it. There may not be an answer to this question, but I have to ask it. With all due respect, what are you going to do?
And I hope I didn't leave the impression that we just sit back and do nothing until the elections of 2026. That's not at all what I mean. What I was hoping to convey is that that's a huge thing that we better do. My political opinion. But you asked the question, I started to address it. I'm going to try not to be too duplicative because we've got a lot of people to ask questions. What am I going to do? I'm going to stay very close to all of you. That's why I'm standing here, and that's why I did one in Norwalk, and why we're doing a Townhall on Monday, and I will continue to do that because that's my job. And you give me the thing. And when I know how you feel and how scared you are, I take that to DC as I will on Monday, and I will do that, number one. Number two, I will continue to try to both lead those of a political inclination. I've got a good bully pulpit. I have a good capability to organize politically. I will do that. I will join in on the protests of April 5th, etc. And then I'm not going to repeat what I did about my unique role with respect to the CIA, FBI, and the IC, because that's actually very, very important. And I'm going to continue to urge, not that this is going to be terribly effective, but I'm going to, I've got 7 or 8 reasonable friends on the other side, and I'm going to ask them, what's it going to look like when you're explaining this to your grandkids?
I don't understand why people are worried about being primaried if they've already given up their power to government, to govern. Why do they care so much about the I don't understand it.
Yeah, we don't actually get lifetime medical insurance. We don't. Anyway, why are people so afraid of being, you know what, actually, the primary is the main tool that Donald Trump will use to keep his people in line, but so are the threats. It troubles me, and I would like to believe that I would be more principled, perhaps than my Republicans are. I've done a few things that I think would give me some confidence of that. So I wish they were more principled, but they also really fear physical violence. They fear lots of things. So again, I shouldn't be channeling the way they feel because I don't get it either. Yeah, they took an oath, exactly. Okay, I gotta move on here.
Hi, my name is Hannah Lansberg. I'm from Fairfield. I went to school here, so thank you for coming here. Your vote to censure Al Green was very concerning to me. I know you already addressed it. I do appreciate the apology that you've given us today. However, I do want to echo something else said over here. How is there a plan to sort of fix that rhetoric now that we know that it concerns constituents? Another question, sorry for having to, but you've been talking about a lot of American issues in this room, and I agree with every single one of them. However, under both Biden and Trump, we've been giving a lot of money to Israel, and I just want to know, what are your thoughts on this? How do we focus on American issues and Medicaid in particular? And how do we combat this commitment to a foreign government's commitment of genocide?
Thank you for the questions. I'm not going to spend a ton of more time on the green thing, but again, just to be super clear here, it broke my heart, honestly, to see the reaction of some friends, and in particular of the African American community. But somebody shouted, "What do you do?" I cast a vote, and I explained why I did. My job as a representative is to do my best. I didn't fully appreciate the emotional impact here. To do my best, to cast a vote, and then to learn from it. That's what I've done. And no, look, at the end of the day, the censure is symbolically important, but it means nothing. So I'm going to move on to defending Medicaid and defending Pell Grants and fixing our healthcare system and making sure that we don't have an autocrat in the White House. Your other question is a huge and painful question. I can't remember an issue that has been so emotional and so divisive than what began on October 7th and, of course, has continued to today. And yes, goes back to 1948 and goes back to well before 1948. All I can do is tell you what I do and listen to your point of view. I actually was in Israel 3 weeks ago for a week and did almost everything that you can do in a week, including visiting the Nova site and a bunch of the kibbutzes that were obliterated by Hamas terrorists, and spending a lot of time in the West Bank, in Ramallah, and Hebron, and in Arab villages in the Southwest Bank. So I got a pretty good feel for the horror. And let me start there. What happened on October 7th to innocent Israelis was a biblical magnitude horror. The suffering and the deaths of thousands of Gazan civilians is a biblical horror. So what do I try to do? People say, will you please stop all support for Israel? And the answer to that question is no, I won't. Because Israel is surrounded by groups, the Houthis, less so Syria now, Hezbollah, less so Hezbollah now, Hamas, which is rearmed and re-personneled, who are explicitly sworn to the destruction of the state of Israel. What I will do is do what I did do, which is join Biden in saying, because of the conduct, because of, in my opinion, sloppy delivery of human aid, of overly aggressive Connecticut activity, I will support Biden when he says we're not sending 2,000-pound bombs. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on the planet. A 2,000-pound bomb has a 400-yard kill radius. There is no military use, ethical military use of that weapon in that context. I will also push the Prime Minister. I spent an hour and a half, I don't know why this happened, but he gave me and a bunch of other members an hour and a half, urging him to do what he didn't do, which is to really take phase 2 of the ceasefire seriously. I thought this is the way you get the rest of the hostages out. This is the way that you begin to wind down this atrocious war. He, not surprisingly, didn't heed that advice. Last thing I want to say, I've explained my support for Israel, and I'm going to stand by that. The other thing I told the Prime Minister, the missing piece here is that Hamas will not be militarily defeated, because it is, in my opinion, a group of truly awful terrorists, but it is also an idea. And it's the only idea that is being presented to young Palestinian men in the region. And until there is a different idea, and it's not 100% on the Israelis to put forward that idea, it's probably up to all of us. But until there is a vision for the future of the Palestinian people, it will, whatever that vision may be, people have lots of different opinions, but until that vision exists in some form, young Palestinian men in Gaza are going to continue to join Hamas.